New Thought Media Network. We are a global broadcast network of positive music, media, and entertainment, inspiring humanity's evolution along the journey of enlightenment and creating a world of love, peace, empowerment, and prosperity for all. New Thought Media Network. Positively inspiring. And hello again, dear ones. Reverend Robert with you over here.
Rev Z right here.
And this is New Thought Today here on the New Thought Media Network. Happens every Tuesday at 2 p.m. Mountain Time. And we have a very, very, very special show for you today. I am so super excited to introduce you to our super special guest. And I want to let you know all of what you're about to experience today has been pre-recorded. Once you understand who we're going to chat with today and all the constraints on her time, how busy this woman is, you're going to understand. We had to do a pre-recording of this, but I'm looking forward to this one, see.
Yeah, this would be the light shining bright for sure. So everybody should come on, sit down, grab a cup of tea, whatever you need, and let's get to it.
Exactly. Reverend LZ and I got to see Gabrielle Claiborne, and I'm going to tell you a little bit more about her in just a second. Earlier this year at the Centers for Spiritual Living annual convention, and we were sitting together. I think we were both picking our jaw up off the floor after she was done. This is such an amazing speaker, and we're so grateful she's got some time to be with us today. So let me do a quick introduction. We're going to dig in. Gabrielle Claiborne is co-founder and CEO of Transformation Journeys Worldwide, an inclusive training and consulting firm with a transgender focus. She travels extensively, helping cutting-edge organizations position themselves to attract and retain the best talent, foster collaborative working environments, thus maximizing innovation and directly impacting the bottom line by creating fully trans-inclusive cultures. Some of her clients include Home Depot, Sun Life Financial, Royal Bank of Canada, Comcast, Mercedes-Benz, UPS, Kaiser Permanente, Cox Media, Warner Media, New York City Pride, the Atlanta Hawks, IGLTA, Georgia Tech, and Centers for Disease Control, among others. Take a breath. There's more.
Yeah, she's busy.
Exactly. Gabrielle has been an out and active trans woman since 2010. She serves on the executive board of Atlanta Pride for the last 5 years and currently serves as co-chair of the National LGBT Chamber of Commerce's TGX initiative and as co-chair of the Trans Affairs Committee of the Out Georgia Business Alliance. She also serves as chair of Out Georgia Business Alliance's TGX 360 Workplace and Entrepreneurship Initiative and as advisory board member of the Outfront Theater Group. In 2020, she published her memoir and her memoir meets self-help book. Excuse me, there we go. In 2020, she published her memoir meets self-help book, Embrace Your Truth, A Journey of Authenticity. In 2019, the Atlanta Business Chronicle acknowledged her as their Diversity and Inclusion Outstanding Voice Award recipient, and she delivered a TED Talk for Centennial Park Women TEDx. In 2018, Gabrielle received the Georgia Small Business Administrators LGBT Small Business Champion Award in recognition of her efforts in advancing LGBT business ownership. And in 2015, she was chosen as Atlanta's best trans activist, and her work was featured in Forbes in 2018 and the Atlanta Business Chronicle in 2017. Transformation Journeys Worldwide was honored to be chosen as the Out Georgia Business Alliance 2018 Small Business of the Year and to receive the Atlanta Hawks prestigious 2019 True Comes in All Colors Award for their cutting-edge inclusion work. The firm is proud to be an NGLCC certified LGBT business enterprise. Ladies and gentlemen, please help us welcome to the program Gabrielle Cleveland.
Thank you so much. It's so great to be with you both today.
Thank you. Thank you for being with us. And you have been very, very busy in all that regard. But what it shares with me as I read that is there is no question in your ability to demonstrate the passion for social change that is obviously within you. What has that been like over the last 12 years?
Well, it's a great question, Robert, because, I think how we show up as human beings, there's a lot of moving parts and pieces to how we show up and what we bring to humanity. And so for me, I think it all started when I first realized that I had to do my own personal work within myself as it relates to living my life as the most authentic person that I was created to live my life as, right? And so the more that I leaned into those moments of courage and, taking those scary steps in the direction of my yes, I then started realizing that, there's other parts of how I show up in the world through my volunteer work, through my vocational work, that all of that comes in alignment, once we start showing up as our authentic self. And so today I'm able to bring all of those authentic lived experiences to the other, expressions of how I show up in the world. So, in many ways, you can say that how I show up, my visibility, you cannot separate one aspect from the other, because I'm in totality, trying to embrace all that I have to bring to the world and creating a world that works for everyone, which is, our mission, as you know it.
Yes. Thank you. Beautiful, beautiful. So glad you're with us. This for me is personally just an incredibly rich opportunity, because I'll be honest, there's a few different initial combinations in your bio there that I'm going to have to go look up following our time together. A couple, I know most of these, but there's a couple in there I got to go figure out what those mean. And that's our opportunity in life, right? To learn more about the richness and the diversity and the oneness, and be able to include everything that's going on around us in our own experiences.
And to that point, Robert, you bring up a great point. To that point, these terms are new for a lot of folks, because as humanity continues to show up, and the more that humanity becomes visible in its width, breadth, and depth, more and more we're being able to identify the language that actually resonates with who we are as human beings, right? So that TGX acronym is probably one of the ones that you're not familiar with. That stands for trans and gender expansive. So that is the new acronym that's emerging to describe the gender diverse community. So yeah, it's like the language continues to evolve and unfold. And that's why, we all have to stay connected and in tune with, this evolution, so that we can show up more inclusively for everyone in humanity.
Yeah, I mean, I think, that is the key. I mean, when we look, anybody who watched this show, Robert, knows that my cornerstone is nature.
Yes.
Is that if I have any kind of anything that I can't reconcile or anything, I say, well, let me go look in nature, because ain't nothing going on there but the true deal. And
right.
So when I see you and everything that you are doing, it just confirms what's present around us everywhere, that life is expansive, that life is diverse, that life is supporting. And that when I look at the thing that you do, some people might read your resume and not know you're trans, and then find out you're trans, and they might come out with a crazy statement. Oh, no, that can't be true.
Yeah. How can that be, right?
But it is. And I love it, because it breaks all the mental stereotypes, or it begins to. If you know, if they're ready, it'll bust them wide open. But if they're not, it at least gets them to thinking, maybe I've been looking at this thing wrong. Maybe I need to switch my vision or my lens or whatever to understand something before I begin to do anything else, open my mouth, judge it, praise it, whatever, so that, as you said, it could be honored authentically.
Yeah. You know, Z, I appreciate you bringing that up, because I oftentimes struggle with people who pay money to go to their, you know, we have in Atlanta Botanical Gardens here in the Atlanta area. We have this amazing conservatory that has all these different aspects of the animal kingdom and the plant kingdom. We'll pay money to go see that, the diversity in all of those different creative, I'm looking for the creative, I don't know, I can't remember how it shows up, right? But when it comes to the diversity of humankind, then we like, okay, wait just a minute. I'm just not getting this because this is so different from my own lived experience, right? Yeah, so I really love the analogy that you've created about, you know, how you go back to nature and check yourself, right? And it's kind of like this check of saying, okay, let me look at this right. So thank you for bringing that up.
Oh, yeah, yeah. That is the gospel.
Yes, it is.
Exactly. Yes. We embrace the diversity, except when it comes to our fellow humans. Yeah. And then you have to be this or that, black or white, male or female, one or the other. Yeah. And it's funny because the people that get the most when I first heard the term cisgender,
right,
it took me a moment to understand. And I've got every privilege in the world, right? I'm white, I'm a man, I've got every supposed privilege in the world. And there's almost an immediate reaction to say, don't label me.
Right.
But wait a minute, we've been the ones that have been labeling everybody else all the way along. And so I think it's incredibly important, and I know it is, for every community, for every one of the different expressions of the divine, to choose their own labels, right? To choose and honor and that. So we want to before we go too deep down these rabbit holes, folks, we got something serious we want to promote. So you know that we do this program on Tuesdays. Part of the reason we're pre-recording with Gabrielle is because tomorrow, March 31st, is Trans Day of Visibility. And we're recording this a couple weeks earlier so that we can have it ready for you on the 30th, so that we're going to learn a little bit more about not only the importance, but perhaps maybe the history of tomorrow, and really what we can do to be good allies tomorrow.
Right. Yeah.
Right. Gabrielle, can you share with us a little bit on the history and the current expression of the Trans Day of Visibility?
Yeah, I mean, Transgender Day of Visibility was established because, you know, as an underrepresented and oftentimes left out community of the LGBTQ plus community, we felt like it was very important that we be visible, you know, and in light of everything that's happening in our world with anti-trans legislation sweeping our country, with all kind of discrimination experience and even violence experienced by the trans community, especially trans people of color, you know, it's important for us to lean in and stay visible, stay connected, because the reality is being trans or gender diverse is not a new thing. We have been here since the beginning of time, right? And we're not going to go away. So the only way that we feel like, or one of the ways that we feel like that we can actually promote normalcy, and I use that term figuratively because, you know, who defines normal anymore these days, right? But the only way that we can promote normalcy is just by showing up and maintaining our visibility. And hopefully folks are going to have the courage enough to say, I want to sit down across the table from you and get to know you, and then realize that, oh my goodness, we have so much more in common than not, right? We all are human beings first. And so our visibility is viability for us, right? So to be viable as human beings, as a beautiful and genuine and priceless expression of the divine, we have to be visible. And so that's why trans visibility came about, is so that we can allow the world in a culture that really doesn't understand gender diverse folks to see our normalcy, to see our humanity and how we show up.
And I think that's key, because the part that I'm saying is key is how you show up, because it would be short-sighted and just flat out ignorant for someone to discount somebody because they don't come in the package that they think they should be, or they thought they would be, or whatever, right? It's like the story where the guy's on the raft and he's trying to be saved, and he calls God and says, send me some help, and ship go by, all this stuff, and he done made his transition and says, I thought you was going to help me. I sent you everything I could, and you ignored all of it. So I don't know what to tell you. So I love that, because the gifts that we bring are so valuable and unique in the package that it comes in, that acceptance is like life-saving almost, and that's what I love about how this is unfolding, the visibility of it, the coverage that is getting, and it's just, for me, it creates a space for me to be authentic, right? So it creates a space for me, if I got any little chinks in my arm or a little misconception in my head, that I need to deal with them. And I need and be forthright, which will then lead to what we're doing now, a conversation to understand, to better articulate, to better support people that are different than me, no matter how they are different from me. And I just love that.
Yeah. To your point, I think that I'm hoping that I am an invitation to folks to say, okay, what is it about me that I need to come to terms with in my own authenticity, right? I think we all are on our own journey of authenticity.
Yes.
It just so happens that my authentic journey looks a little different from someone else's, right? But it doesn't make it any less human than the next person, right? You know that saying, love brings up anything unlike itself for the sake of healing. So I feel like that as we're becoming more authentic, and I think I referenced this in my keynote in January at the conference there that you all referenced, authenticity begets authenticity. So the more we are authentic, we are calling others to do the same thing, right? So I feel like we're all invitations to each other to say, what more can I do? How can I lean into what my heart is calling me to embrace?
Yeah. Oh, beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Gabrielle, what in the richness of all of this, there's about a million different ways we can take this conversation this afternoon. But what I'm really wondering is, for those of us that, and right, in all transparency, I have a transgender son about to graduate high school. I have a gender neutral second child who's just about to go into high school. And we've been in this place for a couple years now, my wife and I, of getting into and embracing and understanding and coming to a better understanding, especially if somebody out there has young children or teens or anyone they know that's moving through a transition or an experience of coming to a greater sense of their gender identity. What can those of us from that older generation, what can the rest of us do to support the trans community the most in these times?
Yeah, how much time do we have?
All we need. Tape is free.
Yeah, right. I think here's the thing. I'm going to share a little bit about an aspect of my personal journey with my parents, right? And Robert, I give you kudos for navigating all that you and your wife had to navigate with your kids, with your children. I think that my family struggled with, did they do something to create this, right? And so what I have tried to, I've hoped for them is that they would understand, and I've tried to communicate to them even, that this is my God created identity. It's not something that they did or didn't do to make me who I am, right? You don't have that much control over me, So I feel like that.
Hey, wait, don't tell us that.
Right.
No parent wants to hear that. You've got children. You don't want to hear that, right?
Yeah. So, but my point is that I want to take the pressure off of parents who may be grappling with something that they feel like that they did wrong, that created something that they're not comfortable with, that they're not familiar with, all that kind of stuff, right? So just know that this is a God expression showing up, manifesting in humanity, through children. So I think that that's one thing that we can all understand, is that we are all created as God in its divine form, right? So that's first thing. I think the second thing is it's important to understand how we have to educate ourselves and stay on top of educating ourselves, because like I said earlier, the terms continue to evolve, and I dare say, prior to your first child coming out as trans, I dare say that you knew much, if anything, about, the trans and gender expansive experience. So you had to do your own education, understanding the importance of pronouns, right? Understanding how, when you mispronoun an individual, what that microaggression feels like on the other end of the person that's being disrespected, right? Is understanding how, with your gender neutral child, how gender binary language is another microaggression that is committed oftentimes to gender diverse individuals that may not use pronouns, that may only use their name, right? So
Right.
understanding the importance of gender neutral language is important. Also understanding the value of your support, your allyship, your advocacy for them. I mean, a kind word, do your own education and showing up in a way that supports gender diverse individuals in the community goes a long way in setting themselves and extending their human experience from survival to flourishing and prospering, right? So the more we show up for one another, the more we do our own education, the more we honor someone's path, even though it's different from our own. It goes a long way in setting those individuals, setting us up for success, and how we show up in the world.
Yeah. I've always talked a lot about, and we do, that this network is in one way, in just the virtual world, but is designed to create the environment in which we can all recognize our greatness, share in that greatness, share in the creative experience, and in all of this kind of stuff. And I want to echo it and share with folks, it's not, pronouns are not easy. It seems it. And other things that you don't recognize are so just, it's so ingrained in our culture, the male, female, that hey, guys or girl or sons and daughters. And I'm personally, like, anybody that comes out and starts a speech, hello, ladies and gentlemen, I'm one of the ones going, oh God, no, you didn't really just do that. Did you do it? No, what did you do? And it only takes a couple of those experiences to start to be able to relate to, oh, what I have done to you, whether through malice or just laziness. And I'm at a point now where I will, when I mispronoun my youngest, even if they're not around, I will correct myself in front of my wife or just to myself. And even in my own dialogue, if I misgender one of my kids, I'm re-correcting, re-ingraining the behavior to use a more inclusive language. It's powerful stuff, and it's a journey.
Yeah, it is. It is. You know, oftentimes we don't know what we don't know.
Right.
And to your point, I think that we are called to increase our awareness around, you know, humanity, the expansiveness of humanity. And so we have to really lean into those courageous conversations. Oftentimes we encourage those we train, get comfortable being uncomfortable in the spirit of learning to do better, because the only time that we're going to learn is when we're stretched. You know, when we lean into those intentional conversations, when we sit down across the table from someone who may have a lived experience that's different from our own, and we get to know them. That's why I feel like that's one of the solutions that we as a humanity have to embrace more in order to dispel this charged, polarized us and them concept of humanity. You know, we are all expressions of the human, of the divine. So I think getting comfortable with being uncomfortable and having these courageous conversations like we're having tonight goes a long way in increasing that level of awareness that we all strive to have.
Yeah, and I think, Robert, you hit on something in my mind, is that most of us are just lazy. I'm just gonna call it like I see it, and we don't want to go out and learn things new, especially if we're benefiting from not learning those new things, right? And so, you know, Robert just brought something to my mind, because I say it all the time. I say, "What's up, guys?" You know, to both male and female or all genders, and for me, it's the thing that I grew up with in the South, right? Or y'all, right? And it works. Yeah, it works. But at the same time, it just misses, right? It's a sword that cuts both ways. And I think, you know, for me, one of the beautiful things that the whole LGBTQ movement opens up for me is, okay, before you open your mouth, take a deep breath, check your environment, figure out where you at before you speak anything, right? And I think if everybody just took that extra 5-10 seconds to do that, we could alleviate a whole manner of craziness that's happening in the world today by just that little idea of breath, because the breath is going to center you, and it's going to give you a time to bring your awareness up and to be respectful of the situation and the person that you're in right at that moment. And so I think that's just beautiful. I'm gonna have to breathe more just to make sure I'm doing it right.
Yeah. I love that, you know, taking a breath and centering yourself, because I mean, especially, let's talk about pronouns for a minute, because Robert, to your point, learning someone's pronouns that may be different than what you're used to, it's like rewiring the brain, right? So you have to stop, as you said, Z, take a breath, center yourself, and say, all right, I need to be thinking about what I'm about to say as opposed to just saying it, right?
Yes.
Right.
Oftentimes I share the analogy that pronouns are like going to the trash can that has been under your sink for 20 years when you've moved it to the pantry and expecting your trash can to be there. You know, if you move that trash can to your pantry, you can't go to the sink. You've got to go to the pantry. So it's rewiring. Okay, the trash can is not there. It's there. And understanding that this person uses different pronouns. So it is that rewiring process.
Yeah.
And I knew my first child for 13 years as someone they weren't.
Yeah.
So I had 13 years of training and ingrained habit. Those grooves in my brain were deep as to who this person was and where they were going in life and what our relationship would look like later in life and what traditions we would share and all that. And so again, folks, right? This is not an overnight process. This is not a flick the switch and you're going to get it right every single time. But what I love about our philosophy is it teaches us to be mindful and conscious and aware of these things so that every day we can do a bit better and a bit better and a bit better, a bit more.
Yeah. Robert, if I can speak to something that you said, because, you know, a lot of times folks reach out to me who are in somewhere in the midst of their transitioning. And they ask me, you know, Gabrielle, how did you navigate all this with your parents, with your sibling, with your kids, with now your ex-wife, with your friends, with your employer, all this kind of stuff? And what I caution them to understand is that, you know, while we have had years to process what's been going on in the background, the tapes playing in the background, even though we have not disclosed this to anyone, we've had time to process this. So when we come out, we have to understand that we have to give folks grace to allow them to travel their own journey with what they've got to go through, right? Mm-hmm. And so for example, for a loved one or for a close friend, there may be some grieving that you have to go through because you are losing an individual to an extent that mm-hmm. you thought you knew, right? Mm-hmm. And this new person is now showing up, and that requires some processing, you know, some sitting with it, some grieving, maybe some dealing with anger or sadness mm-hmm. or, you know, those kind of things. So this is a journey that all of us are on when someone transitions in your life.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing there too, that you said, Robert, that really piqued my curiosity is that is the expectations that are placed on a situation before or after, right?
And
the social the social expectations of what it means to be one thing or another, right? So, you know, you don't, and like you said, you went 13 years with one approach, one forecast, one whatever, and then all of a sudden that got shifted. And so and so I would imagine that there's a little, you know, waltz going on between the old perspective and the new perspective, between you and Rita, how y'all play that mm-hmm. out, explain and feel into it, that requires a tremendous amount of growth for everybody. And, you know, it's a great thing.
Yeah. And here's what I'm most grateful for. I had the training and the upbringing in my life that I may not have anticipated this. I may not have seen, you know, this happened. This is part of life. It didn't even happen. It's not like it's an event or it happened to anybody. Right. This is just, I'm so grateful that I have the community and the philosophy and the training and the upbringing to be able to support these kids.
Yeah.
Because that wasn't available when I was a kid. Yeah. And I didn't have this part of my aspect. Gabrielle, I'm sure I don't know how much of this was available when you were a kid. And like you said, you've known this your entire life.
Right.
And you had a lot more time to be processing this truth of yourself before you were able to share that with everybody else as well.
Absolutely. I mean, this was long before the internet. It was long before the language existed. So yeah, I mean, I was just, even though it didn't exist, I knew something was going on. I knew that I was different, but I didn't have the language. And then when the language started showing up, that's when I started stepping into it. And that's when I had to start, you know, coming out to, you know, all the different places that I showed up in.
Folks, you're watching New Thought Today. If you've wondered what you've stumbled into here, this happens every Tuesday on the New Thought Media Network, and we need to take a quick opportunity to let our sponsors and others say hello to you and let you know a little bit more about what we do around this network and how you can be involved. Please give us just another minute of your time. We're going to be right back with more with Gabrielle Claiborne, and we're going to talk about how all this works inside spiritual communities in the next segment. So plan to stick around. We'll be right back.
let there be love. I am a stand for love, let there be joy. I am a stand for joy. We are making a new world now. Let there be peace. I am a stand for peace. Let there be love. I am a stand for love. Let there be joy. I am a stand for joy. We are making a new world now. Let there be peace. I am a stand for peace. Let there be love. I am a stand for love. Let there be joy. I am a stand for joy. We are making a new world now.
And we're back with more of New Thought today on the New Thought Media Network. I'm Rev Brz, my co-host Rev Z, and our special guest Gabrielle Claiborne here today with you. We've been talking about remembering that tomorrow, March 31st, is Transgender Day of Visibility, and Gabrielle's been giving us a good lesson on not only how to be, I feel like how to be better allies in many ways, or at least begin that journey of being an ally, and helping us to see a greater perspective of the human experience. And that's where I want to dive in next. Alzia and I became familiar with you because of your appearance at the Center for Spiritual Living convention. We've been going to those things a long time, and I'm pretty sure I've never seen you at one of them before. And that's, so welcome aboard in that regard.
Yes,
and then we learned that, okay, you're affiliated and you're working with Center for Spiritual Living in Atlanta, Reverend Dr. David Alexander. So it becomes pretty obvious that you wouldn't have ended up on that stage if you weren't a pretty impressive and important person for the future, I believe, of New Thought. And so that's where we'd like to jump in. How'd you find New Thought? How long you've been hanging around the philosophy? But more importantly, how has this supported you in your journey, not only as a trans woman, but just as a human being?
Yeah, that's a great question. I've always had a spiritual aspect in my life. I'm actually a fourth generation Pentecostal preacher's kid and was raised in that environment for a large part of my life, and actually raised my kids in that same faith tradition. And I know that when I transitioned, when I came out in 2010, I knew that I had to find a spiritual community where I felt welcomed and I felt like I could belong. And so there were a couple of different spiritual communities that I initially leaned into, but the more that I continued down this road of my spiritual journey as it relates to my authentic identity, I stumbled across Spiritual Living Center of Atlanta, I think in 2015, 2014, something like that. And I attended the first service there. And it was like, at the time, Dr. Reverend Alt was the senior minister there. And it was like he was reading my mail. everything he was saying, he was speaking right at me, right? And so this was a huge invitation to me because it resonated with the depth of my being, right? And it was like he presented, his talk, his content from the perspective of, in a way that allowed me to understand my role and responsibility in my own vocational my own spiritual iteration, right? What I learned in Science of Mind is that I can and I am responsible for how I show up and the experience that I have as a human being, as a God created individual, right? And so coming from that Pentecostal faith tradition where you prayed and waited for an answer, it's not that I stopped that. It's just that I did that from a different perspective, as though it already is, and that I kind of took responsibility of the role that I played and how I connected with my creator and how I showed up. And I keep using that term "showed up," but it's just so important for all of us how I showed up in a way that not only was authentic to me, but was authentic to my creator, if you will.
Right. Beautiful.
Well, and I'm gonna let you in on a little secret. I think every one of us, when we went to that center for the very first time, we had the same expression. They must be reading my mail. They talking right to me.
Exactly. Which was a wonderful thing. I mean, I really embrace this because, I'm this individual. I always want to learn and make sure that I'm showing up as my best self, right? And I felt like the teaching that I was getting from the Centers for Spiritual Living was helping me show up as my best self, right? It was allowing me, first of all, to show up in a space and feel like I belong, which was huge, right? It's huge for someone who was looking for a community, a spiritual community that I felt like I could be authentic in, but to belong in that space, that just was like a cherry on the top, right? And now, the direction that, Spiritual Living Center of Atlanta and CSL as a movement is going, I feel like they were leaning into these kind of conversations about what we have to, when we say we want a world that works for everyone, what does that mean today? Right. And so we're understanding the width, the breadth, and depth of that vision. And we're saying, what do we not know that we don't know? And let's have a conversation.
Yeah.
There's just so much opportunity, right? And
Yes.
I love that this philosophy, it's as much of us creating a world that works for everyone or for all, as it is using this philosophy to create ourselves in a way that we can work with that.
Absolutely.
And towards that. It's not just, oh, I'm going to go do this thing. It's I've got to transform myself so that doing that thing actually makes a difference.
Yeah.
And it's not just talking at it or throwing our time at it. It becomes part of who we are. And you represent, and as I shared in the early part of the show, to me, you represent that. You have become this passion that you have for authenticity, for the out picturing of this philosophy.
Yeah, to that point, Robert, I feel like that we all have a calling of what is ours to do, and I feel like, and I've learned in my own personal experience, and I've seen this manifest in other folks' life as well. When we embrace authenticity to the degree that we need to do individually, and understand our relationship and our connection to both our creator and our in humanity, we then begin to understand, and the universe invites us to consider, what is ours to do. I give a talk on authentic leadership, and one of the points that I make in authentic leadership is you cannot be an authentic leader unless you're first authentic. Otherwise they're going to smell you out, and they're going to know right quick that you've not done the work that you need to do in order to set yourself up to be an example of what authenticity looks like. So yes, this teaching helps us show up as our highest and best self. I totally agree with that.
Yeah.
And I love the idea of couchiness, if you will, in the spiritual perspective.
Yes.
Because at the spirit level, It's just spirit. And it is manifesting itself in a myriad of different ways so that you understand, like you said, the breadth and depth of life itself.
Right.
And so when we can approach it from that level and then begin to build around that, or put that spirit in a container, if you will, it's like they say, Hosanna, Hosanna. It's like this is on and popping right now. And you can get beyond all of the superficial stuff, if you will, or all of the appearances, or all of the stereotypes, and look at spirit in action. And so for me, that is so fresh and so uplifting, because as quiet as it's kept, all of us so-called normal people, we got our whatevers as well, right? People look at us and say, boy, he's weird, he's what? And it's just, if people would just take a moment to be open, a lot of this stuff would just fall away naturally, because spirit is always present in a way that is open, accepting, expansive, because you can't put it in a container. So how can you expect it to come in some one package all the way, all the time? Because you can't. And that's great.
How boring would that be? How boring would that be? It's like, yeah, I mean, I'm so grateful that spirit finds a way,
yes,
to express itself through humanity. You know, even though we are in a container, spirit allows us to show up in a way that just express. See, here's the thing: how I show up in the world, how we all show up in the world, is not necessarily unique to spirit. It is spirit. And so when we understand the width, breadth, and depth of spirit, we can say, okay, that is spirit manifesting itself as that person.
Unity is not uniformity.
No.
And in my prayer work, there is that piece of the unification step, right? For all you religious scientists out there that have been trained in some, this thing called spiritual mind treatment. But that time when we're recognizing the unity of life, one of the things that has always struck me is that everyone on this planet is absolutely a necessary expression of the divine. And the oneness, the wholeness would be a much, much lesser place without each of you, without my life and your life and your life and your experience and everyone everywhere. Even those people I don't like or don't agree with or think are no good, rotten, ugly, nasty, just get out of my life type of people, even those people are absolutely necessary to this thing called life, because the oneness would be lesser than it is without them. And without the richness that we get to experience, that's the definition of peace, right? If I can't be at peace with myself in those experiences. Z, I know you want to jump in here.
Yeah, because you just hit me on something there. Because when we really look at it, I believe a large amount of the problems we have are because we look at things as binary. It either this or that, right? And we don't see the spectrum. Right. And so it's not just this so-called definitive point over here and this definitive point over here. It's all those points in between there.
Absolutely.
That we have not taken time to recognize or acknowledge or whatever. And so the moment we can get beyond this whole duality, which is, causing all manner of things everywhere, and begin to look at life as a spectrum, again, magic will happen overnight.
Yeah.
Yes. And to that spectrum comment, Z, I in our training, we often share a diagram with folks to give them the understanding of the complexity of gender. So you can either Google the genderbread person or the gender unicorn, and you can understand the 4 aspects of gender that exist on continuums: our identity, our expression, our sex, and our orientation. So those things exist on continuums. And the beautiful thing about humanity is where any one of us falls on each of those 4 very different and distinct continuums.
Yeah. And when we look at our teaching of, not being in a box and understanding that that life, there's a polarity to life and there's a rhythm to life, and that depending on how that rhythm and polarity is showing up, you're going to stop on different spaces between whatever you're dealing with. And when you can get your head around it, and for those of us who have been brought up in a so-called black and white world, right, where it's either this or that and there's nothing else, that can be disturbing, because that means I have to dismantle everything.
Right.
And that's scary.
It is scary. It is.
And for a lot of old white cisgendered men, it's too scary to contemplate, because everything that we dismantle is, from that perception, only taking something away from what they've always had and always known.
Yeah.
But that's another program, folks. So we're here. We'll be here all night if we go down that alley. So before we go, though, we want to remind you that Gabrielle does have a book. And I gave myself away in the pre-interview that I haven't read it yet. So I'm now putting it on my list. But in that book, you share a little, you were sharing with us earlier that your name was specifically chosen, and you share that in your book. So I don't want you to give us away that story. But I just did want to let people know that if the name sounds or looks familiar, well, there's some intention behind all of that. It's incredibly meaningful. And that's one of the other major things I've learned, not just pronouns in this experience and in this journey, but names are so incredibly important, and to get them right. So we'll let you, we'll make sure that there's a link in the show notes so you can head over to Amazon and pick up her book, and then you can hear the rest of that story. Before we go, though, Gabrielle, give us one more little kind of push. What do you see as someone that it would appear has a pretty good vision casting forward and a good eye on where we're going in society and as a human experience, perhaps? What more can New Thought communities, religious science and Centers for Spiritual Living and Unity and Divine Science and UBLF and Agape and all this religious impulse or this spiritual impulse behind New Thought, what can we do better to keep that movement going?
Well, in the work that we do, we kind of focus on two different tracks: a personal cultural competency track and an organizational cultural competency track. And even though we do a lot of work in the corporate space, this is applicable to spiritual communities, right? There has to be that personal competency that we all need to have to interact respectfully with gender diverse folks, but we also have to do the things as spiritual communities, so that when we have a gender diverse individual sitting in our audience, in our congregation, that they see themselves in our messaging, they see themselves in your talks, they feel like they're visible in how you have all gender restrooms that allow an individual who may be non-binary to use a facility that resonates with their identity, right? Mm-hmm. So it's these types of organizational things that spiritual communities also have to be mindful of, in making sure that gender diverse folks can feel seen and heard. I mean, to the point of what is on your website. Are you, when you put your messaging out there on the website, on your church, on your spiritual center's website, do they see the language that's relevant to them? Do you speak to gender identity and gender expression? This is what we as gender diverse individuals are looking for when we look for a place of belonging for us, right? Mm-hmm. So those are some things. And I'll also, big picture, let everyone know that, and I learned this when I first started going to Spiritual Living Center of Atlanta, that oftentimes when we're embracing something new, a lot of times the house has to fall before it can be rebuilt. So I feel like that we need to be comfortable allowing our understanding of something as basic and foundational as gender to fall and to unravel so that we can create a new understanding of its expansiveness.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Folks, we're going to say thank you also to our sponsors and our committed givers. We've got another minute or two with Gabrielle before we leave. So please don't go anywhere. Help us say thank you to everyone that makes this type of programming possible and allows us to keep doing this. We're going to be back in just 1 minute with more of New Thought Today. Stick with us.
Thank you, Center for Spiritual Living Denver, for your continued support. Thank you, Center for Spiritual Living Midtown Atlanta, for your monthly contribution. Thank you, Center for Spiritual Living North Jersey, for your monthly contribution. And please help us welcome Om Center for Spiritual Living in La Mesa, California. Thank you for your monthly donation. Thank you, Center for Spiritual Living Seattle, for your most generous donation. And a special thanks to Hefferlin Foundation for your generous technology grant. And Suze Ajit, thank you for your very generous donation. And a super special thank you to Dr. Tracy Brown, RSCP. Thanks for being a super donor. And a big shout out to all our committed donors.
And we're back with more of New Thought Today. We've been having a fabulous discussion with Gabrielle Claiborne. And Gabrielle, I hope you'll come back and join us again sometime.
I would love that. Thank you so much for including me in today's conversation.
Absolutely. And before we go, folks, we have a tradition. It's called Final Thoughts. We're going to start with Gabrielle and work our way around the room. Thank you for being with us. We'll be back again next week. Gabrielle, final thoughts?
The one thing that I would say is the pain that you may experience or the perceived pain or risk that you may experience in living an authentic life pales in comparison to the regret of denying who you were created to be.
All right, Z, you get to follow that. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, I will take the easy way out and just say educate. We need to become more educated on the whole spectrum of transgender and LGBTQ and just life in diversity, period. So that would be my thing. And as we said earlier, if you really want to understand some diversity, get out in nature and then go read a book on this topic, and you'll begin to see that doors will open wide.
Yes. And you stole my line. So one mind, I guess you didn't steal it. It's just the one mind. Yes. But it did remind me to remind people the journey is the destination, and we are the ones that can support more and more people along their journeys just by being who we are and just by showing up again in that authenticity. So we've all got a part to play, and we're all in this together. Let's make it a life, make it a world where everyone gets along, where we're all getting along, and a world that works for all, right?
Yep, absolutely.
Thank you for being with us, folks. This has been New Thought Today. We'll be back again next week with more. Please share with your friends, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. Please share with anybody, and we'll be back again soon. Until that time, peace and richest blessings.
Peace.